I know.
Get in your way. It's not like there's room for two people in there.
No, it's not.
Well, if you do, just yell.
Room for this.
You want your walker?
Huh?
You want your walker to help stabilize you?
No, I'm pretty good today.
Okay. Do you need a towel?
I just got it.
Why am I here?
Well, that's what I keep saying, I don't know.
I was teaching today.
I get you.
Hello.
Recording is
Oh,
in
he is there.
progress. There I am. Yep. Hi, everybody. Sorry about that. I had to participate from home today. I just got back from taking my dog to the vet and was a little bit behind, so I apologize about that. So let's see here. Yeah, she's new puppy's getting spayed today. How's everybody doing this morning? Anybody?
Good. How are you?
Doing very well, Rebecca. Doing very well. Let's see here. All right. I'm just going to get this taken care of here. All right. How do I... Cheyenne, are you in here?
She is. She must have just walked away for a second.
She's in there. I'm on the phone with her. She's working on getting the slides pulled up.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was going to ask is how do I control the slides from...
Do you have the slides, Andrew?
Well, I have a PDF file. I don't know if that qualifies as the slides.
Cheyenne's sharing them now. There we go.
Okay.
So she'll have to scroll through them as you're talking for you since she's meeting host.
I appreciate that, Cheyenne. You are an absolute asset, and thank you so much. So let's see here. So we'll go back into this PDF here, and we'll get started. Let's see, facilitator, prepare your market center, track, collaborate, facilitation tips, win the buyer. All right, everybody. So today we're going to be doing make and receive offers. How do we actually prepare for that? So welcome. First off, everybody, welcome to the session. This is Ignite session 17. You may know me. I am Andrew Ganos. I have been with the Market Center since really before Keller Williams Bluegrass Realty existed. I was part of the Downing Street Realty with Myrna and Maria. As an assistant at the time, I wasn't, the big boy that I am now. I was just a little guy getting started. but I've been in and around real estate for a very long time. I grew up in a real estate centric family, and I have turned it into a career. So, any questions that you have at any point during the session, absolutely feel free simply to speak up. Don't do the raise hand thing. I probably won't notice it right away. Do not feel like you can't interrupt me with a question. I will gladly stop and field your questions. It will not upset me in any way. So in the last class, you spoke about working with buyers and sellers from the agreement through getting an offer. And today we're covering the actual offer process. We're going to cover the steps to submit an offer as a buyer's agent and reviewing the offers as a listing agent. There's a note here that wants me to check in about your daily success system. For the following questions, allow for all voices to be heard. It wants to know if your birthday falls this month, please raise your hand, and you're supposed to share that. Does anybody have a birthday? This is not about perfection. This is about progress.
That's just to split the group up. You don't have to do that.
Thank God. That was so weird. Okay. So it's like, why does it want to know about people's birthdays? I don't remember it asking me that last time. So was everybody able to get with your accountability partners? Do you have any ahas from working with your accountability? Anybody at all? All right. Let's remind ourselves about the belief system, the WI4C2TES, win-win, no deal, integrity, customers come first, communication. We're gonna, I mean, all that stuff. Like, anybody have any connections here with the creativity, teamwork, trust, equity, success? These are things that will actually come into very serious account every single time that you make an offer, especially when you start talking about like win-win or no deal, doing the right thing. I had an offer, well, I don't know if it's an offer, but I had a client just yesterday who had called me on a listing that Maria and I work with my mom, Maria. They had called us about a listing that we put on in Richmond, and the buyer is working. They're one of these investors, right? Because you hear on the radio all the time, you see the little signs as you're driving around, and they say like, "We buy houses." I know you've seen them. Well, this buyer calls us up yesterday, and she's clearly new to the process, has not done this very many times before. And we're talking to her and trying to get to know her and, what works for her and what she's looking for as it regards this property that we have listed. And she asked us to do a CMA for her. She asked us to send her all the listing information, fairly standard stuff. And she goes, "Okay, well, I'm going to talk to my finance people and I'll get back to you." And we're like, "Okay, yeah, that's important. You need to have a pre-approval letter. You need to get that far." And she gets back to us several hours later and she's like, "Well, I talked to my finance people and they said this is a no-go because the buyer is not distressed. They're just motivated," which triggered like a little like red warning sign. They got those little red flags. That's a red flag to me. This is somebody who is trying to take advantage of people in the worst situations. Which for me, there's just not really a lot of integrity to that. You could construe it to say that it's a win-win because obviously the people need to sell when they're distressed, and they typically need to sell quickly. And I don't know, like, I have a hard time believing, especially in today's type of market and the market that we've had over the last 5 to 6 years, that you couldn't just list somebody and list a home and sell it in the right way and get more money than these people offer you. For example, on my own property, I own a little townhouse that's on Darby Creek Road, and I've got it up for rent right now. But you know, I get those calls from local investors who say like, "Oh, look, we're gonna make you an offer on this home," and I say, "Oh, great, what's your offer?" And they go, "We're gonna offer you 30% of the value of your home." And I'm like, wow, man, y'all are predators, like absolute predators. Now, if I was in a situation where, you know, I needed money today and, you know, maybe I've got a big hospital bill or something like that, I don't know, maybe my opinion would change. I just have a really hard time believing that it would. And that's where we talk about these keys to communication, keys to integrity, a win-win situation. You know, you have to know that your clients need to know that they can trust you, that you are going to give them the best opportunity that comes to the equity, and you know, that you're going to get them the best deal possible. And when we're talking about making offers, you know, like going over offers, like how can you parse what a good offer is or isn't? You know, there have been deals that I've been part of in the last 3 or 4 years that have 20 or 30 offers at the same time. You know, how do you as a listing agent, how do you as a buyer find the best deal possible? You know, whether it's the best deal that your clients are bringing. You know, I always tell my clients, you know, use a little basketball references because, you know, I'm a 40-year-old male and I live in the state of Kentucky. And you know, like I'm like, you got to go hard in the paint. You got to really, you know, block out on the key and get in there. You know, you got to go hard. And I think that works for a lot of people. They start to understand like what you're talking about, like go big or go home. You've got to get it done as a buyer. And then as a seller, you know, that's where the real parsing starts happening, because I wish I had this as a slide that I could present. I had a deal where I was on the buyer side that we offered so many things. We offered, for one, like 30 grand over asking price. We offered to do option 2 on the inspection. We offered to do seller assisted closing costs. Like we were going to pay some of the seller's closing costs, like we we're going to pay for the realtor as the buyer. And we were going to do an appraisal gap. We were going to guarantee the appraisal gap. This was, I mean, this was a crazy situation for a little ranch that was over in Hamburg. And, you know, ranches in that part of town are just not that common. And there was a ton of competition on it. And I wound up winning that as the buyer's representative. And I later learned after it closed, I later learned that the next closest offer was the exact same as mine, except for one line that I included as a, you know, as part of the other terms and conditions, which was that, look, even if something comes up on this home inspection that we're asking for, we won't ask for anything, which we're not supposed to ask for anything anyway, because it's option 2, but like, we won't ask for anything that's less than, you know, $10,000. Like there'll be nothing that we ask for whatsoever. And because I included that throwaway line, which I wouldn't have even normally included, that was the only difference between our offer and the next offer. And I mean, like everything was the same, and except that, and that made the difference. So as a buyer's agent, I did the right thing there. And as the listing agent was able to go through these 20 plus offers that she had and find the 2 best ones and figure out the difference. And you've got to do the same thing. And that's kind of what we're going to be covering today. By the way, Maria my mom teaches a fantastic class called landmines, like real estate landmines or something like that. I definitely recommend taking that class, because one of the things that she does is she sits down with actual offers that we've gotten on different properties and goes through them with the class and shows how to look for things and what to spot and what to do, and what makes a good deal. So regardless of you and your position, which is what we're learning today, to actually be able to sit and figure that stuff out is completely, I mean, it's invaluable. You need to take that class when you get an opportunity. Cheyenne's setting up education right now. She's probably going through and saying like, oh, we're going to schedule this for next Tuesday. I have no idea. But we'll get that back on the calendar. Just talk to Maria about that. So anyway, so you need to know how to communicate with your buyers and sellers and your co-agent during the offer process. You need to understand the best practices for making and receiving offers in your market. What does that mean? So to understand the best practices for making and receiving offers in your market, 3 years ago, if you didn't have your offer in place before the house came on the market, you weren't getting it. It was going to go to somebody else who knew the agent who was talking and communicating. You had like office exclusive listings were the king of how you got a sale. The average day is on market at the time was 2 days, and that was only because it took time to get signatures back sometimes. It was just impossible. Whereas like 12 years ago, I basically told all my buyers, I was like, look, if I can't get you 10 to 15 grand off the price of this house, then I'm not doing my job. Which is wild compared to what we do today. Like at this point, like I said, we were offering the moon to get a property, and you've got to keep up to date with those practices so that you're not selling your buyer or seller short and what they deserve for their property in the current market. So to start thinking about what you're going to learn today, let's consider questions that we might have and what we'd like to learn more about. Does anybody have any questions before we really get started? Okay, I think that's a good enough pause. So the quote is, I like to think of sales as the ability to gracefully persuade, not manipulate a person or persons into a win-win situation. When it comes to making and receiving offers, it's about being graceful and doing that win-win negotiation. So we'll start by covering the offer process. Explain the, Cheyenne, go ahead and switch that slide over. Next one. Thank you. Back one. There we go. Thank you so much. So this is also in your participant guide. The buyer makes an offer, you go straight to negotiation. The seller responds in one of 3 ways. You counter the offer, which takes you back to negotiation. They accept your offer, which begins the contract to close process, which is another really great class that I've done before. And then you have the opportunity for the seller to reject the offer. The buyer's agent contacts the listing agent to learn more. Don't just assume that no means no, which is actually really important too, because just because you've been rejected doesn't mean you can't figure something out. This is actually important here. So what emotions do buyers and sellers have at this stage of the process? Well, there's excitement, there's trepidation, worry, there's anxiety, caution, impatience. All those things are going on at the same time. And it's almost like you hear about like the 7 stages of grief. Well, there's like the 7 stages of an offer. Everybody's always excited to make the offer. But then as you go through it, a lot of different emotions come up. And, it just depends on how things are going. And we always hope that we can get like smooth sailing and a smooth ride through the offer process. But That's not always guaranteed. And I mean, I've been guilty before of kind of letting my emotions get in the way. I actually did it on my own property. I was making an offer on a property about 3 years ago, and I really felt like I was getting jerked around. And what it was is I was letting my emotions cloud my judgment. And we should have just said, "That's all right, win-win, no deal." Well, no deal. And I should have let it go, but I didn't. And your buyers are going to go through that, and it's your job to sort of step in and be that mediator between your buyers' highs and lows and their emotions, and the actual process of getting the home sold. That's that gracefulness that they were talking about. So when emotions run hot for others, it's our job to remain professional and put together. This is not our purchase. This is not our sale. We don't get to be emotional, even when we are. We serve our clients by being calm, reassuring, in control, and most importantly, by communicating everything to our clients in a timely manner. You got to keep everybody up to date. So if we receive an offer, let's say we're a listing agent and we receive an offer, that offer comes in, it's at asking price, but there's something about it. They want the seller to pay the closing costs, right? Okay. Well, so we need to know that, and we need to begin negotiating. We say, "Oh no, I'm not gonna do your closing costs, Mr. Buyer. You're gonna have to, ante up." And the buyer says, "Oh, well, I don't have that money. Maybe I can pay you more money over the course of the offer. Like actually pay a higher asking price, and then you can afford to pay my closing cost out of your equity once you close, and from the proceeds of the sale. And maybe that will work." Well, while you're sitting there negotiating that, another offer comes in, and all of a sudden you're in multiple offer. Well, if your buyer would have agreed to that offer, you've got to do that. You can't just sit and stall for that multiple offer situation. You have to, in a very reasonable time period, say, "I have received an offer. It is X, Y, or Z." There's an offer coming in. We don't have it yet. I've messaged the other agent. We can't sit and wait around for it. The agent knows that we're negotiating for an offer. They can either do or do not. And what if you sit there and you wait on that second offer, and in the meantime, the buyer from the first offer decides, "You know what? I don't know what I was thinking. I really can't afford this. I can't afford to go $5,000 over asking price." And, they pull out and they withdraw their offer. I've had that happen. Where I was sitting down because, like I mentioned, in the last couple of years, you had to know about a property before it came online. So, what a lot of agents were doing at the time was we were saying, "We're putting the house on the market on Friday. Saturday and Sunday, we're going to let people go see the house. Monday, we're going to review offers." And that's all written out for every agent to see in the agent only comments on the MLS. Well, 3 days is a long time for some people to wait. If you receive an offer on Friday, there's nothing stopping that buyer from going out on Saturday and seeing a different house that they wanted to put an offer on, and they could withdraw their offer. It's reasonable when you're anticipating 20, 30 offers to make somebody wait that long. But what if that's the only offer you get? There are never any guarantees in this business. All you need is one. If you have one good offer and it works for everybody, why not just take it? This is what the timeliness matters about. Lock those people in while you can. A lot of times people will say to you, "Well, can you just ask them, can you just ask, will they take X, Y, or Z? Put it in writing for me, get it to me, make it to where it's tangible. It's a lot harder to say yes or it's a lot harder to say no to an offer that's sitting directly in front of you on paper than it is for me to just say, oh no, I'd never take that. Well, here it is. Anyway, make sure that you get all your documents signed. As soon as you get them, there's one of the ones that always makes me laugh is the inspection agreement form, because our inspection agreement form has a little spot on it where it says, so the buyer is offering this, the listing agent has received, the sellers acknowledge receipt. And for some reason, it's an epidemic in our local real estate community where people just don't get those two. The listing agent has received almost never gets signed, and the one where the sellers have to respond, that always seems to take a long time too. Or on the flip side, the buyer's response where they have to sign that they agree that the sellers have agreed. That's another one that takes a while. Just get it done. Like, don't wait, don't put it off. Do your job today. It's your job. Do it. Get it done. It's going to be better for everybody. I promise you. So just remember that you need to get things done in a timely manner. That's the most important part of this slide here. Get things done in a timely manner. Make sure that you are responsive to both buyers agents and to listing agents in a very reasonable timeline and fashion. Don't leave people waiting. Remember to set up your buyer and seller guides in your KW app. It's a great way to keep your clients in the know on the process from beginning to end. Managing your clients' expectations regarding the timeline and offers is also super important. And I feel like we're going to cover that a lot here coming up. So Command integrates with your office, with our signing software, so with dotloop. So you can actually have it set up to where when you sign the form in dotloop, it just gets transported instantly over to Command. It's definitely important for you to learn Command. If you haven't learned Command, learn Command. Ahas. Do you have any ahas from what we've just gone over, or do you have any questions?
I have something to add.
Yes.
I was just gonna say, don't also, when you're doing paperwork with another agent, although you should always treat them with kindness and respect, don't assume that they fill out the paperwork correctly, and make sure that all the I's are dotted and T's are crossed.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah.
And don't be afraid to send it back and say, hey, this isn't filled out. Can you do that? I mean, you can say it kindly, but I've had to do that several times. It's not hard to put in your number and your broker's number on the bottom of the contract. It's just not.
You know what I actually do, Cheyenne?
What?
And this is a thing that I point out when I do my contract classes is you can actually go as a realtor, you have access to the MLS, and you can look up that realtor, you can look up that house, you can look up that brokerage. Every single thing that asks for that you think you don't know, I promise you is public knowledge available to you within the MLS. You can look up the agent's name fully, how to spell it. You can look up their broker's name. You can look up their license number, it's no longer LBAR. I keep wanting to say LBAR. I've got to get over that. You can look up their LBAR number. You can look up their broker's license number, their office number, their email, their telephone number. All that stuff is available on there. You can even look up their client's name. How do you do that? Well, you go to the PVA website for wherever you happen to be at, whatever county it is, whatever county this home is in. If you look up the address for the property you're making an offer on, it will have the owner's name listed, and you can just pencil that in. You can't sign their name, but you can pencil their name in for them. And you know what? When I'm on the receiving end of an offer and I see that an agent's gone through and done that for me, it makes me feel real comfortable about working with that agent, especially if I've never worked with them before, because that's somebody who minds their P's and Q's and gets it done. I don't know. I just think it's a really good behavior to get accustomed to very early in your career, just doing that. Anyway, let's move on. So now that we've overviewed the offer process, let's talk about how you prepare for the offer once your buyer chooses a home. Remember, your relationship with the listing agent began on first contact. If you've never worked with them before, this is likely when you made the appointment. Which a lot of times these days we do through showing time, and that's fine. But just remember that we all have these little devices in our pockets that I assure you every single one of us keeps handy 24 hours a day. Not Cheyenne, you can't contact her after dinner, but everybody else, we've got our phones. Call people, text people. If somebody can't get back to you right away, that's fine. But feel free to reach out, ask questions, and just be polite. There's very few times in my career where I have lost the pulse of the room, and where I wind up going off the handle, and every single time I've regretted it. Anytime I've gotten snippy with somebody, I've always regretted it. Anytime that I've just acted like somebody else is an idiot, I've regretted it. I've just wished I hadn't done that. Just treat people kindly, understand that people are going through whatever they go through. Just try to maintain a good relationship at all time. If neutrality is the best you can do, then be neutral. But always treat people with kindness. That's the most important thing. So when you contact them prior to writing the offer, you're building that positive working relationship. Be courteous and professional in all of your inquiries. So what are some things that you think are important for sellers? Does anybody want to chip in? What do you think could be something that a seller would find important? Anybody else?
Timing.
Signing. Yep.
Timing.
Timing. Yes.
When they close, when they have to be out, all that stuff.
That's very important. I actually just did a referral yesterday. Where there's the parents of a friend of mine who live in Brooklyn are moving to Chicago, and they want it done within a month. They want to put their house on. So I called up, I called up the Keller Williams Empire, is the name of the branch in Brooklyn, and talked to the team leader there. I said, I need your best. I need somebody who can get it done soon. And they hooked me up, and I talked to this, I don't think she's a young woman, but talked to this young woman up there, and she was on it. And I have all the faith in the world that she's going to get them done in the right time frame. So yes, timing is very important. Anybody else? It's a little early today. We ain't going to be asking a lot of questions, I understand.
Also, I'm in Indiana right now. I take my mother-in-law to therapy at in an hour, whatever time that is. I'm in a different time zone, and time zone math is hard. So we have an hour
guys, here in an hour. You're going to have to speak up, guys. I'm going to have Cheyenne to cover for you.
I am saying, since I'm running the Zoom,
right?
You're either going to have to be done, or they're not going to have slides.
Gotcha. All right. Well, let's fly through this class. How about it? So it's important to ask questions of the listing agent to discover what's important to the seller, so that the buyer's agent can write the offer which would meet their needs. Find out their time frame and motivation for moving. Ask the agent how they would like to receive the offer via email, DocuSign, .loop, all as one document, maybe separate documents. Remember that by making the listing agent's life easier and making it clear that you're an easy person to work with, that you make your client's offer look better. Yeah, flexibility is super important. Avoid questions that would be a violation of fair housing, and not give away, and don't give away any information that would violate fair housing. We'll discuss it more when we get to receiving and reviewing offers at the end of your session. Offer questions that they may have not have thought of that are important in your area. So yeah, so like for example, in that area over off of Grafton's Mill, there's a whole strip of houses that back up to a water retention area, and those houses have to have flood insurance. You need to ask if one of those houses has to have flood insurance, because flood insurance adds a lot of money for your client. Ask whether or not the house is in an HOA. How much is the HOA fee? Is it monthly? Is it yearly? Is it quarterly? Does that HOA fee include things like a pool, or is it just covering general area maintenance? These are all very important questions to ask. You know, like was your home one of the ones in Masterson Station that went through that tornado? How old is the roof? Was it from the tornado, or was it from the hailstorm? Was it from this last year's hailstorm? You know, like, if you're local to the area, there's a lot of questions that you start picking up on over the years that you just ask based on what location you're in. So learning your market and going out and studying homes and studying the market and what concerns people is very important. So we're going to skip past the aha section. We're going to writing an offer. So it's a different slide. Going to cover the writing offer checklist at a high level. Be sure to add any pertinent information. So remember, do not submit a love letter with your offers. Oh man, yeah, this is one that always annoys me. It's the love letter. I hate love letters. A lot of times your clients will ask you to include this personal letter with their offer, and what they're trying to do is they're trying to tug at the heartstrings of any particular seller who's out there. Man, I'll tell you what, it's fine. Like, if your client insists that you do that, then by all means you can, but
No, you
don't.
can't. No, you can't. You can't do
Can't
those anymore.
Is that
Nope.
official now?
Yep.
Sweet.
It's been official for a while. Do not submit love letters. It's a fair housing
Excellent.
violation.
That is good. I missed that memo. I am glad that's
I
gone.
skipped ahead. Sorry.
Yeah, we were having a lot of issues with that for a while. So yeah, no more love letters. Good. Apparently the note here is that the NAR has called them liability letters. These letters open you and your clients up to fair housing violations. They often contain personal information and real characteristics about the buyer that fall into the protected categories, such as religion, race, or familial status, all of which are protected categories under fair housing. They can lead a seller to knowingly or through unconscious bias unlawfully accept and reject an offer. So stick to pertinent objective criteria when submitting an offer as a buyer's agent or presenting it as a seller's agent. This will also come up just when you're talking to other realtors. Like, I've found that there's a lot of realtors out there who will say to me stuff like, oh, well, you know, he's just a single dad going through a divorce. You know, he's got his kid, whatever. Like, all right, well, I wish you'd never told me that. Appreciate it. You know, like, those things come up a lot. A lot of clients will ask you, what is the reason that the people are selling the home, as if that's going to make a difference. The reason is they want to sell the home. You know, it's not pertinent information. The house is on the market. Make your offer. You know, just like that lady who was contacting me yesterday about the house. She only wants to sell to somebody who's distressed. Okay, well, that's messed up. You know, like, that's got issues, and you shouldn't be asking those questions. Either make your offer or don't. They can accept your offer. They can deny your offer. Just make your offer. This can lead to the seller unknowingly or through unconscious. I already read that. So what are the prices and the terms of the offer? You know, let's not worry about heartstrings here. What's the prices and terms? These are what your seller should be using to make their decision. Now that we've talked through the checklist, let's dig into one piece of it, which is being sure that your buyer understands the full contract, its timelines, and ramifications. So I'm going to walk you through the entire contract as if you were my client. I'm going to make sure that I'm setting proper expectations for you. And so I'm going to get out the contract. Cheyenne, do we have, I know that we're supposed to be getting rid of it, but I'm ultimately just not very familiar with the new one to the point that I'd feel comfortable teaching that class today. Do we have the regular 5-page contract?
Do we have it like ready to share?
Well, yeah, it says I'm going to walk you through it.
I can get it.
So we're gonna
Hang on just a second.
no problem. So things about the contract that are important to talk about. At the top of every single page of this of the offer to purchase contract is the address and the date, and the address, the date, and the contract number. So the address and the date should obviously be the same. But why do we include that? It's because since there's multiple pages, we want to make sure that we're not slipping and sliding different contract pages together. You know, they need to be for this offer on this day, included in the contract. Contract number is because, well, what if I have 2 buyers, right? What if Andrew Ganos brings 2 buyers to this listing, and I represent both of them, or Andrew represents one and Maria represents the other one, but we're on a team, and we have we have due diligence to write these offers, and we've asked both clients. We said, well, we're representing this other person, and they say, I don't mind, I want to work with you, and so we just submit the offer, right? Well, you need to know which one we're talking about. So that's why we have the contract number up there. The buyer agrees to pay the sum of. All right.
Hey,
so
since there's several people that are new on here, for the contract number, you can make it anything you want. It needs to be unique to you. I always do like the house number, our office number, and my initials, but you can make it whatever you want. It just needs to be unique to you.
Yeah, I always use for myself, it's always my LBAR number, so 70698, and then I put a little dash. I write the numerals for the street address, so whatever house we're talking about, and then the initials of the street is what I always use. To Cheyenne's point, that it can be whatever you want, as long as you understand what that is. Okay, so don't just put a bunch of gobbledygook in there. Make it something that you can understand. So we're going to kind of go through this reasonably quickly here, but by all means, feel free to come back and talk to me about any point. We're just going to go through and cover the important aspects. So buyer offers and agrees to pay the sum of, this is the amount of money that you are offering. Okay. However much that may be, that's how much the offer price is. Now, this is going to be through, you always put the listing office first and the selling office second. So, Keller Williams Greater Lexington, Keller Williams Bluegrass Realty, EXP Realty, whatever, like you're going to put that first, and then your office goes second. Why do we do that? That's to assist the closing attorneys so that they understand who's on which side of the document. Okay. So the following property located in, you're going to put the county. So Fayette County, Jessamine County, whatever the county is, you need to know that's available on the listing. Property described as follows. That's the street address. All right. You're just going to write the street address again. Okay. With all the improvements, this big box, this first big box that we have, is your opportunity to ask for any old material thing that you can possibly think of. Okay. Typically we like to keep off things that don't appreciate in value with the real property. So like if somebody's offering a car or a pool table, just don't put that stuff on a separate addendum. But if we're talking about a shed, if we're talking about pool equipment, something of that nature, that would be party to the greater property, because the pool comes with the property, right? Well, we need the pool equipment. We need to make sure we have all the chemicals and everything for the first year or whatever. We need to make sure we have the blinds that come with the house. You need to make sure that you have all the fixtures, all the light bulbs, the washer, the dryer, the refrigerator. Is there more than one refrigerator? Sometimes people have a refrigerator in the garage. Got to make sure we include that refrigerator also. Sometimes in the listing it says, not the refrigerator in the garage, in which case you have to make sure not to include that. This is coming at a part where you are, again, communicating with your client and setting their expectations accordingly. All right. Garage door openers. Don't forget your garage door openers. That's an important one. Earnest money, going to section 2 here. All right. Earnest money is important. This money says, look, we're a serious buyer and we're not going to screw you over. Okay. We're not going to get 3 or 4 weeks down the road and then just decide, we're not interested in the property anymore. This is our stake in the game. Okay. The more earnest money you put down, the more comfortable I am working with you. Because if you, to put it in a colloquial term, mess around and find out, if you mess around and find out, that earnest money is forfeit, to the seller. So, make sure that they know the buyer is for real. There's a spot on here that says check or cash. You're always going to take a check. We don't do cash, not at Keller Williams Bluegrass Realty. Now, balance of the purchase price, section 3. There is an option for cash here. Now, this kind of cash we like. Okay. And what that's saying is that your client is going to make a cash offer. You only check this box if your client has money in the bank to pay for this house. You can also check this box if, for example, your client is going to sell a property that is contingent on the sale of that property, for them to have that cash. It's okay for you to check a cash offer. Okay. Now you'll have to later write in a contingency, but we'll get there in a little while. In every other instance where your buyer does not have money available up front, that they don't have to go through a bank. Okay. If they have to go through a bank or some other lender, you're going to check new financing. That's option B. Okay. You're going to put the balance of the down payment. Depending on the type of loan that they have, the down payment amount is going to change. So if they're doing, for example, a VA loan, Veterans Affairs, if they are a veteran of the United States military, so to speak, then they qualify for a VA loan, which can allow them to do 0% down. That means no money. They can show up scot-free. All right. So the VA loan is not the only instance that you'll ever write 0 there, but one of the only instances. There are private loans that are also 0 down, but they're few and far between. If you find one, let everybody know so that we can have access to that also. It used to be that BB&T was a bank, and they had a chip loan, and the chip loan was 0 down. And then it went to 3.5% down. And now BB&T doesn't exist anymore. So there's no more access to that. If they do an FHA loan or rural housing, you're typically looking at a minimum of 3.5%. Okay. These are all really good things to, we've talked about before when I taught class for Ignite, that you want to get to know loan officers. You want to get to know industry professionals. These people are the ones who you can sit and bounce questions off of. They love answering these questions. So by all means, reach out to whoever you like and just get to know them. Take them out to lunch. They'll probably take you to lunch, but definitely get to know them. At the very least, come and sit in on a few of the monthly sales meetings, because every now and then it's a lender who comes and sponsors it, and you can get to know that person. And they're all super nice people with a variety of different products. So, one lender is not the same as the next lender. So, and one lending company is not the same as the next lending company. They all have different products that they have to sell to your client. And what that is their mortgage. Okay. And they come with different terms, different rates. You got to know all that stuff and you got to be down. All right. If you're doing a conventional loan, you're typically looking at the very least amount that you could possibly do would be 5%. Typically, you're looking at 10 or 20% down. Okay. With 20% being the best, because then you don't have to worry about PMI, which will come up here in this next section here. You also need to know their interest rate, and you need to know what kind of loan they're doing. So that second line there says buyers to obtain a type of loan. That's conventional, FHA, VA, rural housing. I mean, there's so many different sorts of loans. You just got to get used to, you just got to know what your client's doing. And how do you know that? When you have a pre-approval letter, you're in contact with your client's lender. Okay. You know what they qualify for. You need to know the interest rate. What is the interest rate that they've been approved for? Why is that important? Well, interest rates change, and sometimes the interest rate goes up. I've had it happen this year that I accepted an offer and then the interest rate went up the next day and they no longer qualified. That's just the way things go sometimes. You need to know whether or not they have an adjustable mortgage or not. An adjustable rate mortgage, or an ARM, used to be really popular. They're kind of making a little bit of a comeback right now. Fixed rate has been incredibly popular since the housing crash in 2007. Before that, you saw a lot of adjustable rate mortgages. And that basically just means that over the course of the maturation of the loan, that the interest rate they're paying can change based on what the current interest rates are at that time. And that gets changed yearly. Sometimes it gets fixed after so many years. There's just a lot of different things. If it's an FHA sale, you know what? This little section right here is important too. You need to know exactly what kind of payment they're looking for. You need to write in whether or not they have an HOA that they've got to pay for, and whether or not they're paying any points on the loan amount. And they have 5 calendar days. Now, it's not 5 business days, it's 5 calendar days. So if you put in your offer on a Friday night, then you really only have Monday and Tuesday for your client to talk to their loan officer and lock that in. That's an important part for you to drive home. If you're doing an FHA or VA sale, you have to check this big box that's down here. The big box, you're going to put in the price of the home and that little line that's got the $ next to it. And that says that the home has to appraise for that value. That's the purchase value. Okay. And then your clients and you have to sign that section. Okay. You're going to have your client's initial. Let's scroll down. A loan assumption, you're starting to see a little bit more often right now. Loan assumption basically says that when the seller purchased this property, the interest rate was much lower than it is today. And they're just trying to get rid of their mortgage, and you're going to take it over for them. It's actually how my parents bought a lot of property back in the day. I've never had an opportunity until just this last year and a half to do something like that. And I haven't done it. So just be aware that that is something that your client has access to. Definitely talk to a lender and find out exactly how that works. Talk to a real estate attorney, find out exactly how that works, because that is a complex issue that you don't want to mess up by writing in the wrong stuff. Rental deposits. Rental and security deposits and advanced rents will be transferred to the seller, from the seller to the buyer at the closing. Sometimes your client will be purchasing a property that has a tenant in it. This happens a lot when you're talking about investors, and not very often, but sometimes when you're talking about somebody purchasing a home just for themselves to live in as a primary residence. And your clients have to abide by the terms of that lease. Whether they're the seller or the buyer, they just have to abide. And sometimes the seller has to sell at a point in time where the lease is still active. So that becomes an important aspect of your negotiations, and you have to talk to the listing agent and find out what the terms of that rental agreement are. And then, of course, any sort of rental deposit that the people have made is going to get transferred to the new owner when the closing happens. Risk of loss. What this says, to really summarize this big paragraph, if there is damage after the contract has been signed, if there is damage to the property that exceeds 10% of the offer price in order to repair, then it becomes negotiable. All right. Like your client no longer has to purchase that property. For example, this could come up if there is a tornado or an earthquake or a flood or something that sincerely damages the house, your buyer can now back out. If the cost to repair that damage does not exceed 10%, then the seller is agreeing right here and right now to make that repair at no cost to the buyer. All right. The way this comes up the most is usually with HVAC. I've had it happen several times where a furnace or an air conditioning unit will go out over the course of the sale, and sorry, seller, that's still on your watch, so you gotta fix it. Inspections. The inspection section is pretty convoluted, but here's the important parts. The seller is agreeing to maintain the property. This goes back to section 6, all of its systems, appliances, equipment in normal operating condition, and to keep the roof watertight and maintain the grounds unless otherwise in writing. Okay. Section B, the buyers have reasonable access to the property for inspections. Okay. That includes all inspections. Section C, wood destroying insect infestation inspection. This is not just termites, it's also carpenter bees, carpenter ants, and that will actually, by law in the state of Kentucky, if there's damage to the house up to 1% of the purchase price, again, then the seller is already agreeing ahead of time to make that repair. And if that damage exceeds 1% of the purchase price, then again, it becomes negotiable. And your buyer no longer has to purchase the home. You can still come to an agreement, but like the seller doesn't have to make that big old repair. It's very rare that wood destroying insects will cause that much damage, but they can, particularly when it comes to decking and wooden houses. You don't see too many wooden houses these days, but I mean, a lot of the interior of the walls is wooden. And I had it happen when I was a kid that the house that me and my parents lived in was a 3-story property, and one wall of our house was an entire carpenter ant colony, and we had to remove the siding of the property. We had to completely replace a lot of the timber that was in the property. I mean, it was a process, and it cost a lot of money. You can ask my mom about that. She knows a lot more about it than I do. I was still a little boy. But the seller's already agreeing to pay for any repairs up to 1%, and that's by law. They have to do it. In the course of a VA transaction, the seller is also agreeing to pay for a wood destroying insect inspection. So in that case, that is the only case where the seller pays for the inspection of the property. Now, what other kinds of inspections can there be? There's 3 options. Okay. You can either purchase the property as is with no further inspections. This will come up every so often when you're working with investors who are really good at what they do, who've been doing it for a while and who are comfortable with making a decision. For your typical client, I'm not going to recommend that one. They don't know, you don't know. So typically option 1 is reserved for investors who know what they're doing. Option 2 has come up a lot more often the last few years. I actually don't really like it, and I'll get into that a little bit. But basically it says that you're going to purchase the property in its as-is condition, and you can still have an inspection, but you're not going to ask for any repairs. This one's really annoying because it seems like agents just want to ask for repairs anyway, and that this is just a way to get their foot in the door. The issue is when you're on the selling side, while this sounds nice on the selling side because, well, they're going to love it or leave it, it's really not, because I mean, there can be a bent nail that's at a place that they don't like that you would have gladly repaired, and the seller can just walk and there's nothing you can do about it. So I'm not really a big fan of this one for buyers or sellers. I would rather you either do option 1 or option 3 in either direction. This is sort of like a middle ground that nobody likes, but it gets used a lot disingenuously. I don't know. I'm just not a big fan of it. You'll notice that it's got a section that says that they need to notify the seller or seller's agent in writing within so many days from contract acceptance. Typically, that's going to be somewhere between 7 to 14 days. It's going to be after you're able to get the inspector out there. So you want to give yourself enough time to be able to get an inspector out there, because your
Can I chime
client's
in
gonna-
here?
Yes.
Well, one thing I really like to do is I always contact my inspectors before I submit the offer and say, hey, what's your availability this week? So that if the contract does get accepted, I know that the inspector can get out there within so many days. And that
That's really
helps
smart.
guide me and that helps guide my clients as to how many days we need for that due diligence period.
That's a really smart thing to do. I would say that typically I've seen as little as 7, which doesn't happen very often, but usually around 10 days, and the most I've seen is 14 days. Actually, I think the most I've seen was like 21 days, but that was a really special circumstance. It's just one of those things where, again, if you communicate, whether you're the buyer's agent or the listing agent, if you communicate your needs, you can just say, look, this is what the client needs, so we need this number of days. That's usually the best way to do that. The third option is to do an inspection where you can ask for repairs. Now, this is typically my favorite one, my go-to, and there's a lot of little boxes. Don't be intimidated by those, okay? You can just check complete property inspection every single time. If there is some reason why you only want to check 1 or 2 things, like maybe a pool or something like that, something that's a little more unusual, you're welcome to do that as well. But just understand that complete property covers all the bases. Some things that are important for our market center that you need to understand, like you see on here, there's septic systems, sewer systems, wells and cisterns. Depending on where you're going, those may not fall within the purview of a typical home inspection. You have to talk to the home inspector ahead of time and let them know that you want those things inspected. And your go-to home inspector may not be qualified to inspect those things. Can they do a sewer scope? Can they do a radon test? Can they test for termites? Can they test appliances? Like, are they qualified to check appliances? Structural systems, like you might have a concern about a big crack on the corner of a house. Well, a home inspector is not really qualified. They're qualified to tell you there's a crack. They're not qualified to tell you what that means. So you might have to get a structural engineer to go out there. You might have to get a pool person to go look at the pool system and make sure that all the components are working. You might have to have a plumber come out and make sure that the galvanized iron pipes aren't rusted through and getting ready to cost your buyer, $10,000 to replace. So the way I look at home inspections, and this is a really good way to remember this, a home inspector is sort of like a general practitioner when it comes to your doctor. You're going to go in, you're going to get a checkup, they're going to tell you that you need to lose some weight, and then you're going to go home and be fine. But sometimes you'll go in and they'll say, hey, this cough that you have, I'd really like to send you to a respiratory specialist. And that's when your HVAC guy comes in. Oh, your nervous system is messed up and you can't move your arm for some reason. Well, I need to send you to a neurologist. So that's your electrician. Like all these different, like your home inspector is your general practitioner, and they're going to send you to the correct guy. They're going to send you to the correct professional who's going to be able to help you diagnose the problem with the house. And that's a really good way to look at all these different contractors and all these different systems of the home. It's important to understand, and this it's so important that it's actually in bold. The buyer understands and agrees that the inspector's report is not a repair list. You cannot send, I mean, you can, but it's stupid. You cannot send the entire repair list to your co-realtor here. All right. Like, you're gonna make them mad. And we all know that we're not going to get every single thing done. I tell my clients every single time that you should expect somewhere between 30 and 70% of this to get done. You know, like, I'm gonna argue till I'm blue in the face for you. But most of the time the sellers won't agree to everything. Most of the time the buyers will want more. And we just have to find that happy medium that works for everybody. You know, what stuff that comes up all the time: GFCI, ground fault circuit interrupters, roof repairs. We've had a lot of wind in the last year, so you get a lot of shingles that are missing. You get cracked shingles from hail damage. You get all kinds of different stuff. There's so many different things that can come up, and what you have to do as your client's guide is you have to identify the important things, the things that, if you're on the buyer side, that, say for example, your buyer may not be able to afford to fix after they purchase the home, and it'll cause a problem, or maybe it's a safety hazard. You know, identify those things and get those things fixed. Like, really concentrate on those things. Or if you're the seller, you know, identify, look, you know, every single person who comes in here is going to want to have their air conditioner working. You know, like, we're going to really struggle to find a buyer who doesn't care for air conditioning. So why don't we go ahead and say we'll get the air conditioner fixed? You know, talk to them in terms of practicality, talk to them in terms of finding a win-win situation. That's super important here. Again, you're going to wind up in a situation here where you have a number of days to get these inspections done. On home inspections, I tend to ask for more time, especially when I'm doing option 3, because when I'm asking for more time, I try to get that home inspector in to look at the property as soon as humanly possible, especially in a situation where I feel like there could be more problems, or that the home inspection could bring up issues that I might not be aware of. Like, for example, this happens a lot of times with older properties, like properties that are over 100 years old. You know, I don't sell a lot of those, so I don't know every single thing there is to know about them. I know just enough to get myself in trouble, which is why I want to have the home inspector who's qualified to go look at those things tell me, well, Andrew, in homes that were built in 1860, you got to look for this. And then you have to have an electrician come in to look at this knob and spool, knob and wire electric that's running through this house and make sure that it's not a fire hazard. You know, like, you just want to have time to get the inspections done. So make sure that you put in an appropriate amount of time to do all of your inspections. Once you have submitted your inspection agreement form to your, once the buyer has submitted the inspection agreement form to the listing agent, then you have 4 days as the seller to respond. If you cannot agree to those repairs within 4 days, then either party has the opportunity to request a release. And even after you've done that, you have another 3 days to come back and say, you know what, I've changed my mind. I'll actually accept the property in its as-is condition if you're the buyer, or you know what, I've changed my mind and I'll actually do all the repairs you asked for. It's actually pretty reasonable if you're the seller. I've only ever had that happen once. And when it happened, it was a really big deal. It's a whole big story. By all means, feel free to ask me about it. It was incredible. Scroll down. So Section E there, it says the buyers have the opportunity to re-inspect the property within 48 hours prior to closing. This is the final walkthrough, and the final walkthrough is there to ensure that the property has not degraded in the amount of time since you agreed to purchase the property. Again, sometimes things happen. I've had it happen where some kids broke into the house and had a paint party where they splashed paint all over the walls. I've had it happen where, as the movers were moving stuff around, they knocked the gas line off of the furnace and the house was filling up with natural gas. That was, thank God I'm not a smoker. I might have died that day. Things can happen that you're not expecting. And it's always a roller coaster when they do. It's rare, but they can happen, and that's why the final walkthrough is really important. Even if for some reason your clients cannot make it to a final walkthrough, like let's say they work or something where they can't make it, or they live out of town, you need to go as their representation and make sure that everything is fine. Even if you're the listing agent, it's still a good idea to just go in and check. Like if something comes up in the inspection, you go and you look at it and you put eyes on the problem. That's a very important thing to do. Disclosures, talking about section 8 here. This is super simple. If the property is new construction, you select option 2 because it's new construction. It does not have a seller's disclosure. If the property is not new construction, it has been sold to anybody after it has been built and that person is now selling it, then at that point you get a seller's disclosure. You check option 1. Unless you're new construction, you select option 2. All right. Lead-based paint hazards. If the property was built before 1978, they have to have lead-based paint disclosures, acknowledgement forms. There's about 5 forms that pertain to lead-based paint that you've got to fill out. The schools are subject to change at literally any time. There's a big long story that I tell my clients that talks about how back in the day when Paul Laurence Dunbar High School was built, there was this what today we would consider like a 4 or 5 star prospect for the basketball team. And I'll tell you what, the county switched the districts about 3 different times to keep him in there because they wanted him to go to Dunbar. And that boy wound up going to Dunbar. Scroll for me. Parents wanted him to go to Lafayette. He did not go to Lafayette. Total living area. I just had this come up on this most recent listing that I put up. Just because the PVA says something doesn't mean it's right. Just because the previous listing says something doesn't mean it's right. Sometimes you've got to go measure. It's a good idea if you can get an appraiser to go measure, because then it's not on you. If you can get somebody who is a professional to go and measure that house, it's a good idea. On this most recent listing, we had the PVA said one thing, the previous listing said one thing, and when we had it measured by an appraiser, that said a different thing. We went with what the appraiser said because that's the most recent measurement. It could be that there's been an addition built or that a new room has been finished in the property. Maybe they didn't have a finished basement and now they do. You don't want to go strictly by what it used to say. You want to make sure that when you are measuring a house as a listing agent, that you are putting correct information out into the world. This is your responsibility to your client, because if you sell a house that's got 1,000 more square feet than what you're advertising, you're comparing it to smaller properties, your sellers are missing out on a boatload of money. And it could be, probably construed that it's your responsibility to make up that extra money. And you don't want that. If you're the buyer, you don't want to be comping against a house that has less square footage than they're advertising. Again, you could find yourself in a situation where you're being held liable, and that's why it says that the buyers advise that representations relating to the total living area are approximate and are not warranted. The buyer is advised to make an independent determination of total living area prior to entering into this contract. That's a super important one. It gets overlooked by a lot of people Don't let it be you. Learn how to measure. Okay. Property boundary. 2 listings ago, I had sold a property that over the course of the time that people were living there, they found out that they had about a 1/4 acre more land than their fence showed them. And that also affected the neighbor's property and fence line. And that meant that their neighbor got a new shed. It's a real thing. It happens. Pay attention to it. Stake and pin surveys are important. I say get them. I suggest to every client that they get them. Even if my clients don't listen to me, at least I know I made the suggestion. It usually costs a few $100s to get a survey. And you know what? I tell my buyers all the time too, it's really easy for me to spend your money. I can tell you that you need to do this and need to do that. And everybody's situation is different, but at least you know that you have told them that. Agency disclosure. It's important that you give the consumer guide to agency relationships and the agency consent agreement that is required by law. Make sure you do that with every single house. Owner's title.
Which you should have already done before you get to the offer. You should have already given them that.
Yes, when you covered this section while you're talking to your clients, that should just be a callback. You should be able to say, remember those 2 forms we signed at the beginning? That's what this is referencing. And you can even point to them. Owner's title insurance. Owner's title insurance doesn't come up very often, but I still recommend it every time anyway. Your buyers always have the opportunity to purchase owner's title insurance. Your buyers will very rarely be affected by the need for owner's title insurance. But I promise you this, when they wish they had owner's title insurance, they really wish they had owner's title insurance. I'm not going to get into it right now, but feel free to ask me questions after the class. Owner's title insurance is a big deal. It'll protect you from some pretty bad situations. Home warranty, I don't feel quite so strongly about. Some home warranties are greater than other ones. For me, it's a negotiating tool. It's something that I can say, look, I don't feel like doing all these repairs that you've asked for. I'm going to go ahead and get you a home warranty, and that'll help cover if any problems come up in the first year. Mediation. There's a little clause at the very bottom of this that says that the parties agree that this clause survives closing. That's the first time in this whole contract that we've seen that. And what that's saying is that if anybody feels like they've wronged themselves or been wronged by somebody else over the course of the transaction, whether it's the listing agent, the buyer's agent, the buyer, the seller, the closing attorney, the home inspector, you name it. If there's somebody who's a party to this deal, then we're all agreeing ahead of time that we're going to sit down with a certified mediator and try to talk things out outside of court. It costs a lot of money, but I promise you it costs less money than going to court. And so we try to resolve issues ahead of time. The biggest problem that comes up in real estate more than anything else is poor communication. If you are a good communicator, I assure you that you will avoid 95% of the problems that can possibly happen. You just got to be upfront, earnest, and good with communication. All right. Closing and title, you got to estimate a closing date. Understand that if you pick a closing date that's too early, that you might have to get an extension. If you pick one that's too late, nobody cares. The only thing that people care about with picking a late closing date is that this is really supposed to be a guide, again, for the attorney to know when people anticipate closing. You might say that you want to close in 3 weeks, but you've got to sell another house. Maybe you have a contingency to sell another house, and that's going to be really hard to do because maybe the next buyer in that chain of sales can't close in 3 weeks, and you're contingent on the sale of your property. So you might want to, really sit and actually think about that on a case-by-case basis. Typically, a loan can close in about 25 to 30 days for a conventional loan. And then when you're talking about a government-backed loan like FHA or VA, you're typically looking at around 25 to 45 days. It really depends a lot on the lender and what they're able to do. If you're in a short sale situation, you're often looking at periods of time that might be 3 months down the line. If you're looking at a foreclosure, you could be looking at 3 to 6 months. There's just a lot of ins and a lot of outs. And depending on the type of closing that you're doing, a cash deal might close in a week. It's just as fast as the attorney can get the paperwork done. So on a case by case basis, this can really change. And that's going to be talking to your lender. It's going to be talking to your client, and it's going to be talking to the other agent. All right. Because everybody has to work together in concert to close on time. And we don't like doing extensions, because every time there's an extension, that's an opportunity for somebody to get out of the contract because they don't have to sign that extension. So, if you can't perform in the amount of time that you've said that you're going to perform in, whoops, I guess I'll take this other offer that came in the next day and was way better. So, peace. Let's scroll down, Cheyenne. All right. Possession shall be delivered with deed is what I usually write in there. That means at the time of closing. There are alternatives to that where somebody could do a pre-closing occupancy agreement if you're the buyer, or a post-closing occupancy agreement if you are the seller. Pre-closing says that the buyer is going to be able to move into the property ahead of the closing. This happens, relatively rarely, but when it does, it's usually for an important reason, like somebody's lease is expiring and the home that they're moving into is vacant. And a lot of times, the buyer will pay the seller rent for those days that they're living in the property. And you've got to go through an entire rental agreement to cover, what happens if the buyer breaks something, while they're renting this property before it's closed. What if they go in there and it's the middle of winter and they put the air conditioner on, don't switch it over to heat, and they break their air conditioner? Who's going to pay for that? Well, it better be the buyer, but now they've got to put that on credit. Now the whole deal is shot. And, well, hope you enjoy renting this property for the next little while. There's real issues to consider. Post-closing occupancy agreement. Well, what if the closing's already happened? What if the seller trashes the place on their way out, leaves a bunch of mess and gunk and nastiness, which happened to me on a deal a couple of years ago?
I advise my clients to check with their insurance company on post-closing occupancy, because it's a big deal for insurance companies. I mean, they're technically renters, and if something happens, who's responsible and all that. So
exactly.
That's what I always tell my clients. Check with your insurance company.
Exactly. And you've already closed on the house, so all the deal's done. So now you're opening up a whole new can of, again, you got to have a rental agreement. You got to talk about, who's responsible for any damage. And usually the seller's pretty good about taking on any and all responsibility. But, it's not an every time thing, and it's just stuff you got to think about. So just understand that that little one line on line 11 there, possession, there's a lot of stuff that goes into that one line. And where would you put all that stuff? Well, put it in box 12, addenda. You can include things like a pre or post closing occupancy agreement, a lease, a seller's disclosure of property condition, lead-based paint forms, termite inspection forms, any number of different addendums that can connect to this sale. You're supposed to write in here that those forms are being referenced. All right. You don't have to put the entire form there. You're just saying that the form exists, and you're including it when you send it to the lender, when you send it to the attorney, so that it can get referenced. All right. Why might this be important? Well, remember earlier I brought up stuff like pool tables, pool equipment. It's weird that pools are two of the biggest problems that we have, whether it's a pool table or an in-ground or overground pool. Cars, anything that would not be a normal inclusion, you're going to want to put it on an addendum. There's any number of different things can go there. The list is long and distinguished. Other terms and conditions. This is where good realtors make and break themselves, is in the other terms and conditions. You can get yourself in a lot of trouble writing stuff here. You can save yourself a lot of trouble writing things here. For example, like I mentioned earlier when I was talking about how I included the bit about on that property that had 20 plus listings and we were 30,000 over asking, and I wrote in the thing that said, look, if there's any sort of problem with the inspection, we will not ask for any repairs up to a certain amount of dollars. That was something I wrote here. Covering the appraisal gap, that was something I wrote here. Post-closing occupancy agreement, I referenced it again in here. Like all of that work that I did, that was all in this section. There's a lot of pre-generated terms that we can throw in there that the office has talked to our various attorneys that we've had over the years, and those attorneys have written up some really good pre-generated clauses for us. Utilize those. It's a better idea to use the words that an attorney wrote than whatever you come up with off the top of your head. If you are having any trouble writing anything, call Myrna, call Michael, call Maria, call me, call a real estate attorney. Jenny Lawson's a fantastic one. I don't know who's doing the office now. Who's the office attorney right now? Cheyenne.
He just switched. It's a guy from Florida, and he was up here last summer for a little while. I honestly cannot remember his name. He's with Foundation because Richard Rogers left.
Got it. Yeah.
But also the appraisal clause to protect your clients goes in this box also. And if you type the word appraisal, it pops up and generates for you.
Yes.
You don't have to make it up.
And you can just scroll through the pre-generated clauses too. Do you have that where you can click on that box? Do you have it set up right now and you can show them no, that's okay. Don't worry about it. There's a little
also
button.
Have to go.
Well, we're at the very end here. So basically the only stuff remaining as far as the contract is concerned is default, exchange, assignment. What do those things mean? So if your seller is your seller passes away, all right, and they have a will, it now becomes an estate sale, and the heirs and assigns of the seller are still subject to the agreement that the seller agreed to. The assigns of both the seller and buyer are
I had to go.
obligated. So like your buyer can't say, well, I want this to go to power of attorney, and then the power of attorney say, oh, well, I'm not going to sign this deal because it sucks. No, I'm sorry. The buyer agreed. You have to sign this. You're bound to the terms. Assignment. Sometimes you get assignment with power of attorney. Sometimes it's for a business. An individual could buy it for their LLC, for example, which has come up a lot in the last few years. Fair housing. Got to abide by fair housing. Exchange. You might be exchanging one property for another property. This has come up several times in the last few years where like a buyer might be moving from out of state and they want to sell a property that they have in North Carolina or that they have in California or that they have in Nevada, wherever they're from. And they want to purchase a new home here directly with those proceeds, and they do a 1031 exchange in order to avoid tax problems. Default. Please don't default. Always tell people not to default. Defaulting only hurts them, does not hurt anybody else. The reason that's in there and the reason it's so late is back in 2007 when we had the housing crisis. There were
I'm sorry, I have to go. I'm going to leave this up for you. Just
I appreciate it.
I'll just close that when I get back, but I have to take my mother-in-law to therapy.
Of course, you have a safe drive and
Yep.
Be careful and enjoy yourself. All right.
Hey.
All right. Back in like 2007-8, when we were in the housing crisis, there were a lot of really hard feelings about what was going on there. A lot of sellers, homeowners, felt really hurt by their lenders, and a lot of changes happened in that industry at the time, and one of the things that we kept encountering was people who would intentionally default on their loans rather than continue to make payments because they felt like their payments were unfair and unjust. And the issue that the issue that we were finding was that they were doing it thinking that they were causing a problem for the bank or for the attorney or for the realtors who were involved in the process. And it's like, no, that's not going to do that. That's only going to hurt you. And so this is a disclosure ahead of time to sort of explain how default would work over the course of your sale so that you're just alerted ahead of time and you're doubly incentivized as the buyer to not default on the sale. And also in the case of like a seller, like let's say you have a short sale and you just stop making payments, you know, like how that could affect you as well. There's a lot to default and a lot of different ways that it can affect you in your sale. And you know, it's important to talk to lenders. It's important, like I'm going to say this a lot today. I know I've already said it a lot, but it really is important to talk to people who are in the industry who don't do what we do. So your home inspectors, your lenders, your real estate attorneys, to really start to understand the different caveats, why people do the things that they do, and why we have written the contract the way that we have. I can tell you any number of things from the real estate perspective, but I don't know, like the way that Jenny Lawson looks at some of these is entirely different. Jenny Lawson is a real estate attorney who teaches classes at the association, and she's brilliant. I mean, absolutely brilliant. And if you get an opportunity to take any of her association classes, yes, do that. She is sharp as a tack and incredible. And you know, that's going to be different from the way that Carrie Cheek looks at them. Carrie is a home inspector with Rosie Home Inspections. She's the owner of Rosie Home Inspections. And she is a fantastic home inspector who I trust implicitly, but she looks at houses very differently than I do because she gets into the nuts and bolts of homes and what that means. Where I'm interested in the nuts and bolts of value, she's interested in the nuts and bolts of condition. So, you know, price versus condition. That's how we do our business. TRID closing disclosure. Section 21 here. The TRID closing disclosure basically was something that came out around 2013, and it's also connected to the housing crisis. And what that says is when we receive a closing disclosure as realtors, as lenders, as brokers, and as clients, we are able to freely trade information between one another in order to get the job done. It is private information that we are agreeing ahead of time can be shared within a circle of trust. And that really kind of comes down to your fiduciary responsibilities to make sure that you're not sharing information with people who don't need to have it. And finally, there's a section here that is all printed in big bold letters and it says that as the buyer and the seller, you've read and understand the contract, its contents, and you understand that once it's executed by the parties, that it becomes legally binding. You're not relying on any verbal statements or representations, that everything within the deal that is within your understanding of the deal has all been written down, which is an important thing too. If it's not in writing, it doesn't exist. You can say it exists, but it's really hard to prove it. And then if you don't understand any part of this contract, then it's important to seek legal and or accounting advice. Now, why are those two called out specifically? In most cases, realtors are not attorneys. We talk like we know the law, but we don't. And you can get yourself in a lot of trouble talking like you know the law. You can talk like you know accounting, but you're not an accountant. If you were an accountant, you wouldn't be a realtor. If you were an attorney, you wouldn't be a realtor. Maybe you would be, but that's only because you hate yourself. I'm kidding. That's just me being silly. The important thing to know here is that you have to convey to your clients what your role is. That goes back to the Consumer Guide for Agency Relationships, the Agency Disclosure Agreement. I know that you are the buyer, but what am I? Who am I to you, Mr. Buyer? I know that you are the seller, but what am I? Am I a dual agent? Do I also represent the buyer? Do I also represent the seller? What is my role? You have to understand your role, and your clients have to understand your role. And your role is not accountant. Your role is not attorney. We talked briefly about this little section earlier where the offer is to be accepted on or before. That's your offer's expiration date. Fill out all the pertinent information. That's all available to you on the MLS. It's all available to you on PVA. Okay. You have to utilize both to get it all, but make sure that you do that. Does anybody have any ahas? Any questions that you want to ask me regarding anything that we've been over? Because I've been talking for a long time straight. Surely someone has a question.
I don't have a question, but I just want to say you did a great job going over the contract. And yes, the new contract has a lot of different nuances to it. Still similar, obviously, as far as making sure you do your due diligence and you know it and you can explain it.
Yes.
And so I think you did a great job.
So the thing regarding the new contract that I think is important to understand is that it's a very different document. It does the same thing, but it does it in a very different way. And I've taken the new contract class twice, actually, but that was several months ago. And I'm pretty confident that they've made changes since the last time that I went over it. So what I'd like to do is I'd actually like to have another opportunity to go take that course again. And then next time I might try to teach the new contract instead of the old one. But the old one is still perfectly usable if you like this offer to purchase that we have. You can still use that. It won't go away on .loop for a year. And even after that, there's nothing forcing you to use the new one if you're more comfortable with this one. The new one is a lot easier to fill out. There's less nuance, so to speak. I think of it as an order form. And so you're going to have to really understand the ins and outs of the order form that makes up the new offer to purchase. There are some very different implications with the new.
A lot more with the
purchase.
timetable. Yeah, a lot more of the timetable and the time of the essence is actually really laid out. And you need to make sure, especially if you're working with multiple clients at the same time, that you set your reminders and you make sure you document and you don't let one of those timeframes slip, because you can really hurt your client.
Absolutely.
And I also had, I think someone had recommended, it was really great putting in an offer, calling the listing agent. This was especially early on when it was being adopted, to ask the listing agent, do you have a preference? And I had one small town, they just were not, they hadn't had the training yet. They were just like, use the old one, like they just did not want that new one. So it's sometimes a good way to just reach out and say, hey, do you have a preference?
Yeah. And, I mean, like me, for example, like I'm a young guy, I'm pretty good at change still. I haven't gotten to that point in my life where I just resist all change, but I still prefer the old one because it's just what I'm familiar with. And I know how to explain it a lot more fluently than I do the new one. I do think that it's important that we take the time to learn that new one, because you're going to encounter it a lot. Over time, more and more people will use the new offer to purchase than will use the one that I just talked to you about. You'll still probably see the one that we just went over quite a bit more often for the next year or two, but I do expect that it will be fully phased out over the next year or two. By the time we get to about 3 years from now, I think it'll be a rarity to see it. A welcome rarity for me, but at the same time, there are some really good things that the new offer does. It's a very clear cut and dry in terms of it, in terms of the actual terms of the contract. There's no negotiating other terms and conditions. That none of that happens. You simply check the applicable box, and that means exactly what it means. And furthermore, the new contract is like 12 pages long, but the actual contract, like the substance of it, is only a couple of pages long. I think it's actually shorter than the current contract, the one that I just went over, in terms of the actual terms.
Well, and I think it flows
And then the
better
rest of it is a
too.
lot of definitions. It's a lot of explaining what's going on based on what choices you have and the legalese behind that. And being comfortable with that and how to explain that is going to be a very important tool for each of you to learn. It's an important tool for me to learn. And that's why I've gone, like I said, I've gone and taken the class twice. I need to take it more because I have to get to a point where I feel fully comfortable and engaged with that. And you should too. And we can do it together. We can have it together day. But
Well, and
as
I like
far
what you stated about measuring too. And that's something that I have not done is, myself go and do the
Yeah.
measuring. So
Yeah.
that might be, something we do in the future is have some classes on that just to help, step through some of those things, the nuances of,
Yeah, Maria actually
because even like
has
you say, like stairways, do stairways count bathrooms? Like some of those, it's always a great refresher to go over, what counts in square footage, what doesn't.
Yeah. Well, Maria used to teach a measuring class. You might want to talk to her to see if she's still interested in doing that. And what's really fun about measuring classes is that we get to take a field trip and we get to go out and actually measure a home together and learn how to do it. Like it for most of us, the last time that we learned about square footage was when we were in middle school. They don't teach us how to measure a house when we're in real estate school. There's not really very many classes on how to measure a house, even within Ignite or other Keller Williams stuff. Like there's how-to videos, but there's not really very many classes about it. But when we do have a class, it's cool because you get to go and walk around and learn hands-on. Like not just me sitting here telling you what to do, but you get to actually put the measuring tape on the property and function as a working realtor, which is neat. So I'm glad that you like that. We're more than happy to teach people how to do that. And then there's also the option to, not have it be your responsibility and have it and go by the PVA or go by an appraisal, a recent appraisal. Try your best not to go with what the previous listing said, if you can help it. If you have to go back to an old measurement, see if you can get in touch with the builder. Ask your client if they have, or ask the seller if they have made any improvements to the home, like square footage wise, at any point. Any add-ons, additions, finished a closet, like whatever, finished the basement, whatever. And if they have, definitely remeasure. And if not, check with the builder and see what the builder's measurement was on it, because they usually have pretty spot on information. So let's see. What else more do I have to go through here? So we got about 15 minutes. now that we've talked through your role and analyzing the offer as a buyer, as a buyer's agent or as a listing agent, let's how do you present that to a seller? You know, like as a buyer, we've talked a little bit about putting together the offer and what makes you make those choices. But when you have 15 different, I'm actually going to get up and grab a power charger real quick. So you're going to walk through my house a little bit. It's exciting. When you are presenting offers as a listing agent, there are plenty of times these days where you have more than one, or even if you only have one offer, how do you present that? So my methodology is to get alert the buyer, or sorry, or to the offer as soon as possible. Doesn't mean you have to go over it with them as soon as possible, but you have to make sure that they know it exists. Okay. Even if you just send them a text message, or if you send them an email, forward them the thing in Dotloop, you can actually change the settings for each individual person that's attached to an offer to say view only, or you can have it be fill and sign, or you can have it be can edit in private. So, or just even can sign. So usually your clients are going to be on can sign, but you don't want them to sign it right away. You got to go over it with them first. So you want to make sure that you set it to view only. It's probably a good idea because a lot of times the loops will go crazy all over the place, and you'll have 4 different offers, got 20 different offers from different people that are in different Dotloop folders. And so what I'll typically do is when I'm in Dotloop, I will add a new folder. I will name it the name of the realtor who's involved and the date. And then I'll then say Andrew Ganoss offer folder, if I were the buyer's agent, Andrew Ganoss buyer folder. And I will put all of the pertinent information. You can go to the other loop and you can make a copy of that. There's a button that says make a copy. You select every single document that you want to transfer over. You click make a copy, and then you can move it to your folder. So it's all consolidated in one place. Okay. Once you have all the different offers in their own individual folders within the loop that you're accustomed to using, that's already got your clients assigned to it, at that point, you send them everything so that they can view it. You invite them into your office, is usually good protocol, or you go meet them in their home. And then you have all the offers put together in a functional format. I like to still print a lot of the offers off. I like to have them basically in a little binder so that I can say, this is this offer, this is that offer. If the people really only want to look at stuff online, that's fine. I can work with that. And then I'll just guide them through what folder to click on and where. But typically I like to be in the room with my clients when I'm going over this stuff. And you just go through them one by one. Usually you should have been looking at these ahead of time so that you already have kind of your favorites picked out, but you still present every single offer. You never, ever do not present an offer. If you get an offer for a piece of cheese in exchange for this house, you present that offer. Okay. I don't care. The law doesn't care if it's a piece of cheese. You will present the offer, and then your client can deny it, okay, or accept it if they're into cheese. So talk through it, figure out what makes more sense to them. Sometimes your clients are out of state and you have to do things on a Zoom call, or you have to do things on FaceTime, or just in a phone call, or God forbid in text message. I'm a millennial. I love texting. That's a lot of information to text. But you've still got to present everything. Always keep the tone of your conversation positive. Do not criticize the buyer. Do not criticize the agent. Do not criticize the offer outside of comparing it to other offers. Okay. A very polite way to say that is this is an offer that we have received. And then here's another offer that we have received. And between the two, this would be my preferred offer. Does that make sense? It means you're not putting the offer, the buyer, or the agent down. You are simply concentrating your positivity where it matters the most. You have to explain every offer. You have to explain to your seller the difference between all the different financing, all the different terms that we went over. You have to explain to them. So this buyer has asked for the chandelier that's in the living room, and the chandelier that's in the living room belonged to your grandmother, and you want to take it with you to this house. So is it more worth it to you to have this offer that's asking for the chandelier, or do you want to counter offer this offer and say, hey, I like your offer, but no chandelier? Or what if I were to replace the chandelier with a similar one, because this one has sentimental value to me, but I understand that you want a chandelier. Like, people get nitty gritty on some stuff, and it's important for you. This goes back to identifying what's important to your client. Figure out what's important to them. Sometimes things will come up that you didn't expect, and just work with them and move forward. So at this point, you've already talked through all the generalities of an offer, and if you haven't, you need to be sure that your client understands the entire contract. Now, again, they're not going to know it the same way that you know it. Okay. Their eyes are going to gloss over the exact same way that your eyes glossed over while I was explaining it. All right. But you're going to do your best to interject important little stories, little jokes, stuff to grab their attention and keep them focused and in the game. Okay. There's a lot of clients who are going to say something like, why don't we just skip to the best one? And you got to be like, well, I have to at least mention these other ones to you. Okay. They have to understand the offers. They need to know why this one is better than those other ones. There's not a lot that you have to do that requires you to sit down and be at a desk and focused and working. And this is one of those moments that you have where you can really showcase your ability and what you bring to the table for your client. This is one of those intangible moments where you can show your expertise, is when you're talking about one offer versus another offer, where you can talk to your buyer and you can say, I understand that this is the offer you want to make, but this is why I think that you should offer something different, because X, Y, and Z exists. These are the real spots that you have where you can shine as a realtor and really showcase value. Does that make sense? If the house has been on the market for a while, or if they didn't price in your recommended price range, you need to be sure to have your CMA ready, along with the current days on market and the number of showings, to create context for the offer. This is coming up a little more often now. And what you're seeing happen is clients who want to get as much money as they possibly can, and offers that are coming in at asking price or possibly even lower, because buyers can get away with that a little bit now because there's not as many buyers on the market, especially in the middle of winter. And so you need to have an updated CMA. The last CMA you did on this property could have been a month or two ago. Have one for today. Go to Flex, show them you've had this many viewings, you've had this many showings. you can really put into context what that means. What's the average viewings and showings for a property of this type? You know, why haven't we had more showings than we have over the last weekend? We expected to have 40 people in here and we only had 4, or we only had 1. But that person made an offer, but they're the only one. They're the only prospect. That can really put things into perspective for people. Maybe get a deal done that might not otherwise have gotten done. And sometimes they'll still want to hold off, and that's annoying, but you deal with what you deal with. Always be professional. Let's see here. As a listing agent, once you have presented the offer, it's your turn to consult. I swear to God, my phone keeps going off all of a sudden. As a listing agent, once you've presented the offer, it's your turn to consult with the seller and respond to the offer. You need to keep your client, or you need to help your client come to a decision about how they would like to proceed. You explain the positives and the negatives of the offer and the various responses, and then it's their turn to make a decision. That's important. You do not make the decision for them. You have a preferred offer. Their preference may be different. Maybe there's an offer that offers more money, but closes much later. And that's not necessarily always the best thing. Like, it might be worth it to miss out on a couple grand in order to close in a timeline that works for them. So many different things, which comes back to understanding your client and communicating with them. Remember that there are 3 ways to respond to the offer. You can counter the offer to begin the negotiating process. You can accept it as is, which happens a lot these days, or you can reject it completely, which happens even more these days. There hasn't been, for the last few years, very much negotiation. I think a lot of newer realtors have kind of missed the boat in terms of how to negotiate, because there just hasn't been a reason to for sellers. Sellers have been able to carte blanche, get whatever they want. Well, that's not really the case anymore. Interest rates have gone up. There's a lot fewer buyers on the market. Buyers are demanding more. I just went through a whole section of the deal where I got beat up. I got beat up in the deal because my clients asked me to ask the realtor if there was any chance that we could close sooner, because they moved out of state and they don't want to deal with the house. And well, I told them not to, but they wanted me to ask anyway. And we wound up sort of getting put over the barrel when it came to contract negotiations for repairs, because the people knew that we wanted to close. They knew that we couldn't afford to make double payments on 2 houses, and they held our feet to the fire, and we had to give up 10 grand, which sucked a lot. So keep that in mind while you're negotiating, that every single statement you make can lead to further problems. We took a risk because it was supposed to be as is, and then they abused that. Like I said, option 2 is not my favorite, and I was recently reminded of that. So understand why that can be that way. So you can accept the offer if the offer is reasonable. You may decide to accept it and remind them that once they accept the offer, they're under contract with that buyer and that buyer alone. Now, you can take a backup offer, but we refer to that as the second place offer, and that starts to get into things like a first right of refusal. So what is a first right of refusal? So you've sold the house to somebody, all right? You're under contract, and for some reason that buyer has not been able to perform. They've not been able to secure financing. They've not been able to close on their house. Maybe their offer is contingent on the sale of another house. You can accept other backup offers, and you have to go over in the other terms and conditions, things like a kick-out clause, like what is the methodology that we're going to use in order to get out of this contract when we have a better one come along. are we going to give you 48 hours to perform? Are we going to give you 72 hours to perform, 24 hours to perform? Is it an immediate kick out clause? There's so many different ways this can go. Like it's a class all on its own. But if it's a reasonable offer, why not take it? And even if you accept that backup offer, it's just a backup. LeBron James gets a lot of playing time. And when LeBron James is on the floor, his backup does not get on the floor. You get to practice, but you don't get to play. When it comes to housing, if you're a backup offer, you're not going to immediately start doing home inspections. You're not going to send your offer to your lender to get that process going. You're going to wait to see what happens with the first place offer. So that's important. You're only working one offer at a time. You can counter the offer, consult with your client to determine a reasonable counter offer. Following the rules for your market, write the counter offer on the correct form and have the seller sign it. Remember that counter offer is a rejection of the initial offer. And remember that there are risks to haggling over $500 or even $5,000. And what that means is that sometimes one gets away and you go to have it. And it's right there. And I tell people all the time, at the end of the day, it's $2,000. Like once you're within $2,000, we're really just arguing to argue. Like unless there's something very, very specific that you need. A lot of times when you get into that nitty gritty place, that's where clients will start asking you to mess with your commission. I typically recommend not doing that. Get good at defending yourself. There's a cost of living, there's a cost of doing business, and your commission protects you. And in your first year, most agents close one house. Like that's just how that is. It's very rare that you get an agent who closes more than one in a year in their first year. And if that's you, I really hope it is. If that's you, good on you. We're going to set you up with the tools to get done, but you don't haggle over your commission. You have value. We will help you get there. But also make sure that your client understands that arguing over $500 could cost them the deal, especially these days. Buyers are a lot more finicky than they were a couple years ago. Sellers aren't just getting any old thing they want. The buyers who are coming and putting offers on the table are usually now people who are really set up to succeed. Higher interest rates means that people who were sort of borderline as to whether or not they could qualify now simply don't qualify. It's cut out a lot of chaff to have a higher interest rate. And that's across the board. That's on FHA loans, that's on VA loans, that's on conventional loans. So now most of the time what we're dealing with is conventional loans and cash. Get the occasional FHA or VA. They have some more opportunity now if they're in a good position. But cash buyers, they know they have value. Conventional buyers, 20% down, they understand what they're bringing to the table, and they'll hold your seller's feet to the fire. Alternatively, you can just reject the offer. If the offer is unreasonable, the seller can reject it. It's up to the seller if they would like to offer the buyer a chance to submit a new offer. It's good practice these days to write the word rejected on the front page of the offer in big bold ink, and then have your seller sign that it has been rejected and at what time. And that is to prove that you showed your seller the offer, especially in multiple offer situations. A lot of agents these last couple of years have been very salty about whether or not their client had a chance because they think their client made a really good offer. And they don't understand that people have been going all out in order to get offers accepted. And sometimes they're getting beat by several $1,000s, but they still want proof that you even showed their offer to your client. So that's how you do that. You reject the offer, you write rejected on it, and you put a little initial on there from your seller. Remember, you can only tell the other parties what your seller has instructed you to disclose. This is important too. For example, if the sellers reject an offer and are happy to tell the buyer's agents the terms that they would accept, then you can do that. But you can't tell the buyer's agent that information unless your seller gives you permission. More often than not, your sellers will give you permission to disclose that information because they're trying to get themselves the best deal possible. But we are not supposed to disclose that unless we are told to, because we're in the business of creating a free market and people can offer whatever they want. We're not trying to show any favoritism to any one realtor over another realtor. So do your best not to ask for it. Do your best not to give it away. Multiple offer situations, again, we've talked about several times. In a multiple offer situation, you can also call for the highest and best from all of your offers. This has been a pretty good practice over the last few years. Highest and best basically says the very first offer you bring, you're going to come correct. You're going to tell me what you can do. And if you can do it, that's great. And if not, don't offer that. Whatever the highest amount of money and the most terms you're comfortable dealing with, that's what you're going to offer me, Mr. Buyer. Mrs. Seller is going to get all she wants. General parameters for calling for highest and best is called limited to current offers. Is it broadcast on the MLS? You do want to make sure that if you have put, reviewing all offers on Monday, that you actually review all offers on Monday. A lot of times people will write, the seller reserves the right to accept a good enough offer in advance. A lot of times the seller will accept an offer in advance of that because the terms are just that good. Or the buyer will say, look, I know that you're reviewing all offers on Monday, but it's Friday and I need to know now. So you're going to respond to me in the next 24 hours or not at all. And then you have to take that to your client and say, well, I know that we said we're reviewing all offers on Monday, but this person's very serious and here's their offer. And do you accept it or not? And do you accept the risk of knowing that if you turn it down now, that it may not be here on Monday? That's an important thing to deal with. And as with any deal that you do as a new agent, please consult your brokers, your coaches at every step to make sure that you're compliant with all rules and regulations, not just for the market center, but that you're detailing the full array of options to your client and abiding by all laws is very important. So as we wrap up, I know we've gone a few minutes over time, but as we wrap up, does anybody have any questions or concerns that you want to run by me?
Would you step through one of the backup
go ahead.
offers? So say someone has first right of refusal and then
Yes.
everybody falls through. What do you do with the original contract, the original offer,
Mhm.
is written as, hey, this is a backup offer.
Right.
And how do you deal with timeframes and all of that when you're writing that?
So it changes. The easy answer is that there is not a clear answer, unfortunately. Basically what you would do is, first things first, when you're writing the original offer, you're going to say this offer is contingent on something. Okay. So what could it be contingent on? It could be contingent on an inspection or on an appraisal. It could be contingent on the buyer winning the lottery, to be able to finance. If your seller would agree to that, which would be ridiculous, and you should represent your client better than that. Maybe they're desperate. it's usually contingent on the sale of another home. Okay. More often than not, there's another home that the buyer has to sell. And so there's forms that you put together that say, we are ensuring that this buyer is putting their house on the MLS within the next 24 hours, or that it is already on the MLS. If it is already on the MLS, this is their MLS number. This is the address of the property. This is what we're asking for the property. We understand that so like in the section that I was talking about, this other terms and conditions and addendums, you're going to write in there the first right of refusal. In the other terms and conditions, you're going to say this offer is contingent upon the closing of the property owned by the buyer at this address with this MLS number that is currently under contract, or is currently seeking contract, or is currently on the market, or currently off the market. Whatever the actual condition is, as it pertains, and must close by XYZ date. If it has not closed by XYZ date, then at the discretion of the seller, we can null and void the contract with the earnest money being refunded to the buyer, which is what we would typically do, because in that circumstance, that they have a contingency to sell, that means that they don't qualify for financing without the sale of that home. And once we have provided notification of the intent to void the contract, then the buyer has so many hours, days, weeks, whatever to perform. Typically, we see 48 to 72 hour kickout clauses. On occasion, we see immediate or 24-hour kickout clauses. I have never seen one that is over 72, but that doesn't mean you could not do that. And so let's fast forward. So now we get to the point where you have received another offer on the property that you want to accept, okay, as the seller. So you want to accept that offer, and you now notify the buyer's agent that you have the intent to void the contract. So you've got that kickout clause. So you go ahead and accept the other offer, and you write in there that this is being accepted as a backup offer. And at the time that the first place offer has been made null and void, then this offer will move up and become the first place offer that is being worked on. And then everybody just kind of sits and waits, because however long you've got to do the kickout clause for, whether it's immediate, 24, 72, 48, whatever you want to pick, hours or days, however you want to write it, they have that time to try to perform. And usually they can't, like it's unusual that somebody can have been sitting for days or weeks or months, being unable to perform, and then all of a sudden they can. But sometimes they can. And if they do wind up being able to perform, they wind up selling their house, which usually in the case of contingency comes from something like, maybe they had an offer that they didn't want to take. It technically got the job done, but they didn't really want to take it. And so they went back and negotiated with those people. Or maybe they lowered their asking price and they wound up getting an offer, or something happened where they wound up being able to come to execute their contingency. At that time, the first place contract can say, we're here to nullify the kickout clause. Here is evidence that we are going to be able to perform. At which time you'll say, okay, well then, contingent on the closing of this property, then we can move forward. And you can still keep your backup offer, but then you've got to go to the backup offer people and say, Well, it turns out that the buyer performed, and so now we're just contingent on the closing of their property. And do you want to stick around for the amount of time between now and whatever the projected closing date is? Because that'll probably be several weeks. And it was that people were saying yes, because there just has been such a low inventory that if you find something you like, you just kind of stick with it and pray. But usually it winds up closing unless there's some kind of unforeseen problem. And if there is an unforeseen problem, obviously if it closes, then everybody's released from any, contingencies that they have, like just as a rule of having been a backup offer. The house closed, you're not in a deal with the current owners of the house anymore. The previous owners no longer own the house to be able to sell it to you. So you're released from any obligation to that contract. You can even have a release signed if you want, just to make things super official. On the flip side of that, if for some reason they have cleared the kickout clause, but now we are in a place where the offer is still contingent, let's say the offer on the contingency falls through, then at that point, the seller can now say, well, first place buyer, I'm sorry, but your contingency has fallen through, and we'd like to go with our backup offer, or we'd like to release, and we would like to release, and we would like to put you back into the water, and we're gonna go on to our next net that we have over here and get the fish that are in this net. And at that point, the kickout clause has already been released. Oops. So unless they negotiated another kickout clause, they can just be released from the contract, and they have to sign that to acknowledge release, which can get a little hairy. It's usually a good idea to have some kind of language regarding contingencies, no matter what they are, as to how that contingency's release will be handled. Even if it's having even having gotten rid of the kickout clause now, you still want to have some language regarding what happens if this contingency falls through at a later date for another reason. There's a lot of ins and a lot of outs, and it's
So
not.
let's say
Sure.
that the kickout clause comes into effect. They cannot perform and the backup offer becomes the main offer at that point.
Yes.
The way that offer was written, you have certain timelines. You've got 7 days, and you all of those dates and times, close within 30 days, etc. All of that. I know with our new offer, they really prefer to have kind of a neat and tidy all in one. How do you recommend that, as far as then say my buyer is now bumped up to the first place, right?
Yeah.
How does all that play out with those different dates and the different times? I mean, at this time the clock is ticking by the date but like, what correspondence do you need to do between agents and clients to say that this was you're now in number one, and this is the date and time on which our clock is ticking?
So with the new contract, it's a little different. This is actually one of the reasons why I prefer the old one still. It's one of the things that I think is a real problem with the new offer to purchase, is that everything on the new offer to purchase is time is of the essence. Which, if you've been to any of the association real estate classes, you'll know is a really big deal, because that's a very cut and dry. If this is not performed by X date, X time, then you completely whiff on your opportunity to do that. And I think that's a really big deal when it comes to things like contingencies and inspections, where things can come up that you're not prepared for, that it's impossible to prepare for, especially. So my recommendation regarding a potential kick out on a backup offer would be, if you're using the new contract, go ahead and do your inspections and everything, understanding that you may not get the house even if you find the home acceptable. It's going to discourage, I think, the new contract. I think it's going to discourage backup offers because of that, because who wants to go and spend money on inspections and appraisals and everything else that we spend money on for a house that they don't even have? You know, like they have it on paper, but only kind of, and only under a very particular circumstance. And so as a buyer's representative, and as a, I mean, really, whatever side you're on, whether you're on the listing or the buyer side, I would recommend to the buyers, if you're using the new contract, you need to go ahead and do your inspections. We'll provide you reasonable access, just as if you were the first place offer, and you know, we'll negotiate with you independently. And as the seller, I would suggest only focusing on the repairs for the first place offer. And I would write into the inspection agreement that these repairs will only be performed in the instance that the offer to purchase moves into the first place offer, is basically what I would do. I do think that would, again, very much discourage backup offers using the new contract. I would tell my clients it's not a good idea to do that. Whereas, I mean, you tell them that anyway now, because it's typically not a good idea. It ties up your client's earnest money. If they see another property that comes in that they want to put an offer on, they've got to get a release of their backup offer before they can put an offer on another house. You know, it just slows them down. So unless,
So you're saying on that backup offer that the dates and times and everything of the original offer are still there. So say you've got an offer and it's contingent on someone selling a home, and you know, that could be for 20 days, 30 days that they're willing to, you know, wait, obviously. And so as a backup offer, you still have your earnest money out there.
Yep.
You are on the backup offer. There's no possible way that if you then jump into the first place, if you don't already have your inspections and you don't have everything, that you're even able to close. Like it, so the clock doesn't start over at that point?
Nope, not according to the new contract, because the new contract says time is of the essence, and that is a hard and fast deadline that is non-negotiable. And that, I think, is, amongst other things, the biggest issue that pertains to the new offer. I'm very surprised that BAR approved that contract form with that verbiage in there. It's very surprising.
Well, but so what's the difference between that and the old contract? Because with the old contract, we still had time is of the essence, and we still had dates and times, you know, for inspections and stuff.
Time is not of the essence in the old contract.
The verbiage, right?
Yeah,
but you still had your inspection period, and it ends at this date and this time. So
yes, but it was all very negotiable. Is the big change. Because you didn't write time is of the essence. If you did write time is of the essence into any of your offers, I mean, that's your choice, you know.
Well, so if you're writing an offer, say with the new contract, and you're doing it as a backup offer, is there a way to say that this is a backup offer, that if moved into first place, the clock starts at that date? In other words, once it's a signed and ratified contract, at that point, then that clock starts ticking. Is there a way to incorporate that in with an addendum or something that would?
Very, very likely, yes. I can't honestly answer that with 100% certainty because I don't use that contract yet.
You haven't been using that contract, yeah.
But
is that what would happen with the old contract, though? So with the old contract, how did that play out?
Well, with the old contract, it was really simple because you just added a variety of addendums. You would have you'd have the first right of refusal, and you would have everything that pertained to the various kickout clauses and contingencies. You know, like it was very simple, and you could always just go through and write like they've got the blank addendum to offer to purchase that's available in LBAR, in .loop, sorry, and the Bluegrass Realtor forms. and you could use that to justify anything that you needed to do. If you needed to do an extension of the kickout clause, if you needed to do an extension of the inspection period or backup offers or whatever you wanted it to be, closing date, it was all negotiable. We did our level best to stick to those times. And if you got past those times, it certainly opened you up to some potential problems, but the flexibility was there. And when everybody's communicating and in good order with one another, it worked very beautifully. It basically, the old contract is jazz music and the new contract is classical music. You can only play the song one certain way. Whereas with the older contract, it's more like jazz music and we can all kind of flow together and do what we need to do. And there's pros and cons to both. But I think with the new contract, there's probably, I would venture to say, the ability to add some addendums and some things
Well,
of
I'm
that
thinking
nature.
there has to be because of the time frame. I mean,
Yeah.
once you get past that point of no return on the new contract, that's it. Like they're not this last minute, like, oops, something, that's pretty much it's all in.
Well,
So,
and the other
if
thing
that's
you
the
can-
case, if you're writing a backup offer,
Yeah.
there's no possible, you could have already missed all that time. I mean, they could have messed around with the sale of the house and the contingencies and everything else. And then, so I agree. I don't know how you even write a backup offer with the new contract unless there's a way to add verbiage stating that, because the thing is it's not a ratified contract until everybody's accepted and signed. So at that
Right.
point, it seems as if it has to go back and you need to redate things. Like it's a backup offer, you submit it.
No.
And then everything
it would be signed because it would be signed the day they accept it
as a backup offer. Yeah.
Yes, as a backup offer. But here's the thing: there's two things.
So you just
off
have to
the
put
top
a lot of
my
cushion
head.
on that.
Well, there's two things off the top of my head that I think you could do. And then there's like if I were to go back and specifically look with that in mind and go back and look at the contract, I bet I could give you a little bit better detailed answer. But the first thing that comes to mind that I believe you could probably do is you could go through and you could effectively strike through time is of the essence. All right. And make sure that everybody initials, understanding that time is no longer of the essence, that is struck through. And then the
Well, it's
second,
my understanding they're not allowing strike through on the new one.
yeah, well,
That they
what's
really want a
what's
full
really fun
clean,
about
so-
being a realtor is that realtors, we get to bend stuff because we're not attorneys. So the other part of that too is that we have every one of us, every single realtor, you, Kelly, are your own business. I am my own business. Denise is her own business. Cheyenne is her own business. You are bound to the rules of your team and you are bound to the rules of your office and broker. And then you're bound to the rules of yourself and your clients. And BAR cannot tell you what contract you have to use or what it has to say. And they're going to discourage things like strike throughs and try to tell you that you can't do it. But at the end of the day, there's nothing stopping you from doing that.
If both sides agree, then both sides agree.
Exactly. If both sides agree, then it's an agreement. Now, I don't recommend to new agents that you go through and start striking everything you don't like. But at the same time, that's kind of the beauty of the old contract, is that you have the ability to do what you need to do. And it's gonna be a strong recommendation from me, that particularly when it comes to the new contract, that you sign up for those classes. And I would genuinely do it more than once, because all of us, even the veteran agents, are reasonably new to that. Some agents have been using it for about a year, but over the course of that year, since it was first announced, it's already gone through some changes. It's not the same as it was when I last took a class. I think it was 6 months ago. when I last took a class on it, and I've been busy and I haven't stuck with it. I haven't gone to more classes regarding it. So one of the things I'm going to be doing is going back and looking through that, and I'm going to, now that you've brought it up, sit and look at that with the eye of like, well, what am I doing if this is a backup offer? There's several things about it that I think are a little short-sighted. I do think it has its benefits. I think it's incredibly, incredibly good for general real estate and new agents. I think it's a much easier contract to perform than
Well, I think it
pre-
really holds people to the fire. I think that the old contract was, a little not loosey goosey, but it was just sort of like, does that end of day mean 5 o'clock or does it mean midnight? And of course, even though we could put that in there,
Yeah.
that like, what was it? Calendar day? Was it,
Uh-huh.
a weekday? So,
Right.
those are definitely gray areas in the old contract that are cleared up on the new contract.
Yes.
But yeah, I do think that it's just a whole gray area of how would you even have it be a backup offer on that.
Right. And I bet you that there's something in there about that, because the last like 6 or 7 pages of the new offer to purchase is all legalese. And I've looked at it before, but I don't remember that answer.
Yeah.
I would bet you that there's something, but if there's not, then my recommendation would be to tell your clients, if you plan to use it, then I would tell your clients who have the backup offer that they need to go ahead and perform. They need to do their home inspections. They need to talk to their banker, their lender, and let them know that they have a backup offer, but that they have to get moving on it now because they're still being held to the timetable, and time is of the essence per the contract. But that, at any point they may cancel that, and to try to hold off on charging them for stuff as long as they can, because that's one of the problems that you run into, is that your buyer is going to be paying for home inspections, they're going to be paying for appraisals, and they're going to be starting like the underwriting fees, and they're going to be starting getting stuff to the attorney and doc prep and all that kind of stuff. And the longer they wait, the more things they have to pay for a house that they might not get. And they'll be left at the mercy of their lender and attorney and you as to how much they get charged for. And so if they can stomach it, I would probably tell them to just not submit a backup offer with the new contract. If you want to submit a backup offer, use the old contract. It would be my initial recommendation. I just think it would make things easier for everyone involved. But that having been said, I do want to take the time to go through the new one again, specifically with that, set of glasses on where I'm looking for that situation, and see what I can figure out, because I bet you that there's something about it. I have a hard time believing that there's that.
Well, it seems as if it has to have some sort of clause in there that's going to state that, the clock starts ticking basically at the time that the backup offer is accepted. And I think if you're listing a home and you have an offer fall through, I think I think most sellers would understand that, oh crap, you mean my offer that offer fell through? What do we do? Well, the clock starts ticking. You can either go back on the market and see what happens, right? Or you can accept this offer and the clock starts ticking at that date. And at that date, I guess and that's with the new contract, the way I understand it, is they really like it neat and tidy. At that time, then I think, it's going to be time-stamped a new one. It's going to be basically as that backup offer.
Yep.
It's going to, those times and signatures are going to be wiped out, and they're going to repopulate with the current time and then get new signatures, initials. And that's when it all starts. That's my guess. I don't know. I've been through about 4 classes on that new contract. And like you say, I mean, it's changed multiple times, slight nuances, but yeah.
The concern that I have is that they don't have anything for that. I remember when I was reviewing it the last time that I took a class on it, I was doing my best to be open to it because I'd already heard some things, but I was doing my best to be open to it. And even with being open to it, I was finding a lot of things that really sent up red flags for what I'm accustomed to, which is the bigger part of that. Just because it's something I'm accustomed to doesn't make it right or wrong. Okay. And so what it does really well is, like you said, it puts things in order and it makes things very just this is the way it's going to be, and we're going to stick to this timeline and we're going to do that. It just so happens that there are situations in real estate, such as with a backup offer, where those things don't work very well. And I wouldn't be surprised if they have nothing for that. And at the same time, I would be surprised if they didn't. I'd be more surprised if they didn't, because it would just speak to a level of lack of concern, which I don't like to think that. I like to think that the competency is there. But I know that there were things, I mean, just the basic conclusion of time is of the essence gives me a lot of concern when it comes to backup offers, specifically with backup offers. There's a lot of other stuff gives me concerns for, but specifically with backup offers, there's that. I mean, that's asking a lot. And
But basically makes it where only way you would be able to do it was if you're a cash buyer and you're buying as is, that you're ready to just pull the plug. Like, you want the house so much, you're fluid, you're ready to do it. I'm a strong backup offer. Maybe it's less money, obviously, but hey, I got great terms, because even if your first one falls through, man, I'm ready to close in 7 days. So that would be about the only way, I think, unless it's written in specifically.
And like I said, I think that there's definitely a benefit to familiarizing yourself with both contracts at this time. Even if let's say that you get a listing, okay? You get a listing and it's a really good house, and you get 5 offers that come in. Some of them will be on the new contract and some of them will be on the old contract, and you got to know how to do both right now.
Yeah. And explain it to your client.
Yeah, and I think that's going to stay that way for a couple of years. I truly do. And so it's important at this time to familiarize yourself with both, with the idea and understanding that we're probably going to be moving to the new one, regardless of what our feelings are about that. And so I will gladly, Kelly, or anybody else, if you want to, I will gladly take the time to sit one-on-one with you and go over the new contract, because I do understand what all of the language means. I just don't have it in front of me, and I'm not hyper familiar with it to be able to explain it ad hoc.
Well, and like I say, I've taken that class at least 4 times. Because I jumped on it immediately. I was in one of the first groups, and of course then it changed. Good. And I was glad it changed, because there was no way to even do a counter offer on that. I mean, it was just, that was it. And you had to re-strike everything, all the dates and signatures, just start over. And it's basically just so they're having a lot of changes. But yeah, I do think that there's going to be a lot of questions about, because we are not lawyers. And so, we do rely on those pre-written clauses that we can drop in, because it's not really recommended for us to write that. We're not attorneys. And
and that's why I tell you too, like, it's perfectly fine for you to run things by your favorite attorney. My favorite attorney is Jenny Lawson. I love Jenny. She is basically my aunt. I met her when I was in my early 20s, and I've just kept her around. I'm 41 now. I've got people that I went to UK with who are attorneys now, who I can run stuff by. Make friends with people as opposed to just business associates, because attorneys cost a lot of money, and a lot of attorneys will talk to you for free because they like you. Realtors, we're really good at making friends. And even if you wind up in a situation where somebody's going to charge you to say the thing that you want to say, to write that language for you, it's probably a good idea to run that by an attorney. And a lot, like if you don't have prior experience writing that clause, you know, and you can always go through the Keller Williams provided attorney. We have an office attorney who, as Cheyenne was saying, they just changed. So talk to Jeff. Jeff will know who that person is. And we can get you in touch with those people to help you get those clauses written. And plus there's like Myrna, Maria, myself, Michael, you know, Malia. There's so many people in the office who are extremely seasoned veteran agents and realtors who can tell you what to put in a way that will be good for you. In the Loop, we have those clauses that are just available. And if something doesn't fall within that purview of what's just pre-generated, if you feel any level of discomfort, it's a good idea to run it by one of us.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, I'm definitely not a free will.
Yeah. Like I accept calls effectively 24 hours a day, as I've mentioned in one of the classes I taught previously. And I'll talk to you. I don't care what I got going on. You know, I'll talk to you all.
And your mama's awesome because your mama's awesome. So I always keep her in my back pocket too.
There you go. And you know, as much as I think of myself, I will tell you every time Maria's better. She's just been
doing it so long. You know, I'm just driving through my neighborhood the other day, and she was giving me a ride home. And she's like, "Oh, I sold that house," and I pretty much sold all these houses in this neighborhood. You know, like yeah, I know you did. But so Peter Starling, I think, is our new counsel, because the last Coffee with Counsel was back like November 1st, and it had it listed as Peter Starling. So I think he's our new guy.
Okay, well then get in touch with Peter too, because Peter charges the office, not you. So
right, exactly. Use it.
yes, utilize that. And it's not going to be the thing where you talk to Peter every day or anything like that, you know. But he does have a responsibility to our office, and going through Myrna, going through Peter, those are your number one resources.
Yeah.
Well,
the office would rather you be keeping them out of litigation. So they would rather pay the counsel on the front end a wee bit as opposed to major litigation later. So
that's right. And trust me, you would like that better too. Mm-hmm. So otherwise, is there anything else that anybody wants to ask about anything that we've been over or haven't been over? Like, is there something that I didn't cover that you wanted me to cover? Okay, well,
now we can jump on the other call. There's the lunch and learn today. So
ooh, all right. Well, you all enjoy your lunch and learn, and thank you for coming to my TED Talk. And y'all have a good day. Okay.
Great. Thank you, Andrew.
Of course. Anytime.
Bye-bye.